Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whichever the case may be. For all of you listening out there across the crazy planet Earth, welcome to a brand new Vestiges After Dark. And I am your host, Bishop Brian Willett, coming to you live from the deep woods of Western Georgia on this October 24th, 2023. Tonight, we talk about the archetypal journey. This is part 2 from last week. We're going to be discussing the tarot with brand new guest, James Ferrera. Be an interesting, I think, take on it, different from last week, but giving you more perspective on how the archetypes affect our lives. And since that is so central to everything in the mystical and esoteric realms, I think all of you will find it very enlightening. You don't want to miss it. Don't go away. Everybody, I hope you are all having a wonderful morning, afternoon, or evening, whatever it is for you out there. I'm very much looking forward to having this show and continuing on this esoteric journey. I think you're going to find it to be quite an enlightening path towards realization, and that's ultimately what this show is all about. For those of you who are new to Vestiges After Dark, know that we talk a lot about archetypes. I think people sometimes think because this is a show on a church channel that we're only dealing with theology. And while we do discuss theology quite a bit from time to time, we tend to do it from a very different vantage point than what many of you out there are probably used to. In fact, I was having a discussion today that pretty much brought out the idea that it is impossible, and this is how I phrased it more or less, it is impossible to understand theology outside of its archetypal context. It is impossible. As soon as you take theology out of the archetypal context, it just becomes fantasy dribble, okay? It really does. And this is what you have now with these evangelical churches teaching fantasies. They do not understand the authentic spiritual reality of the Bible. They teach fantasies. And this is what gets the atheists all riled up and gives them all this fuel for their fire against religion, because they hear these fantasies and then they say, well, see, you believe in that, that God that lives in the sky, that the long beard on the throne. And there are people that actually have a literal understanding of it this way. And that's because they have a zero comprehension of how archetypes work and what they mean. And what I love the most about understanding theology from an archetypal vantage point is that it pretty much defuses every argument that an atheist has against religion, which makes it a lot of fun for me. Not so much fun for them, because when I do actually get into this with them, you see them shut up really quick and then move on to another subject.
Destroy them.
Yeah, it does, because they live their entire life to keep these arguments against religion alive. It's like they live for it. They really do. And well, when you understand theology archetypally, well, that all breaks down pretty quick. And so that's what this show's all about. I was actually on a show this past week. You might have caught it on my social media. And it was a podcast that Profoundly Pointless, it's called, that airs on all the the typical places you find podcasts as well as on YouTube, much like this one, but it's not a live show. And I felt that it was a fairly well done show. But after it aired and it was a pre-record and I saw the comments from their audience, I very quickly realized that I made a mistake by going on it. And I had been on that show before back in
I thought it sounded familiar.
Yeah, I've been on that show back in I think 2018 or 2019. So it wasn't unfamiliar to me. But it was very clear that there was either a direct agenda or a subconscious agenda to present exorcism in this Halloween-y kind of horror film way. All right. So when I was asked questions, I always qualified them with the archetypal reality behind them. But those were all cleverly edited out. So I'm going to say this now, and I hope that those of you out there listening will take this to heart, but I will never go on another fucking pre-recorded podcast again. Do not ask me. Do not bother my office staff by requesting my presence. You've blown it. Okay? You've blown it. Because when you do a pre-record, then they can edit you out. When you do a live show, they're kind of stuck with what you say. And I will never do a pre-record ever again, unless I really know someone. Like our guest tonight, James, I did his show. He's a friend of mine. That's a different matter. But if I don't have any kind of connection to you outside of you wanting me to come on some random show, don't even bother to ask, okay? Particularly if it's a pre-record. If it's live, I might consider it. I might consider it if it's live. And this is why I do not live television, but live podcasts like this, live streaming, because you get the reality of it. You don't have a chance to edit it out. And it's a real conversation. It's not a tailored one. It's not curated to a particular agenda. I'm not saying that Profoundly Pointless was being malicious, but they were very negligent in how they presented the data that I gave him in the interview. And so there was a lot of hostile comments in the comments on the videos that they've put out there concerning this interview I did. And all of them would have been explained by the edited out material. And what kind of pisses me off is that the host of that show didn't even come on in the comments and make that clear.
Nah, they're just trying to get
They wanted sensationalism. Yeah. So fuck that, okay? I'm talking to you, all of you who keep asking me to come on your fucking podcast. You pissed me off. You're not going to get me back on again, okay? You want to come on a show to talk to me? Come on this one, because we're going to get fucking real. Pisses me off. All right, and I'm not in the best of moods this week. If you've been following my social media, you know that I've gone through a back spasm from all the stress and sitting at a desk for hours on end. And see, I'm the kind of person that when I get into my work, I get into my work. I go into a zone and I don't come out of that zone. And I will sometimes go in and sit there and realize, my God, I've been sitting at this desk for 15 hours. I've done that several times. And if it weren't for, having the distractions of ordinary life, I probably might be at my desk for longer than that. But it's not good for your back. And I have a very comfortable desk chair, but it's still, I find that as you work and as you get into it, you slouch and you start getting into different positions, and then you get your arm up and you're doing the mouse. And this muscle right here between my shoulder and my neck seized on me. And it became excruciating after I went to a dental hygienist appointment where all she could do is bitch at all the wine I drink because there's all these stains that she had to now get off. Telling me that I'm going to have to start swishing with water after
Tell
every...
her, damn your teeth. You were thinking of your heart.
Yeah, I was not too happy with that appointment either. So I've had a really pissy week. People have really pissed me off this week. So if I'm a little edgy tonight, now you know why. That will change once we get into the subject matter. But I just want to make sure you all know that it's been one hell of a miserable week. And I am just glad that somebody suggested that I go back to my old routine, which for some reason I just didn't think of it, of 800 milligrams a couple times a day on the first day, and then reducing down after that. It took the inflammation right away, and it's stiff. It's stiff, but it's actually feeling better, good enough to have liturgical libations tonight. So what do we have tonight?
We have a Basil Hayden 10-year straight Kentucky bourbon. It's 80 proof. And I really am a fan of the dark rye, which the bishop turned me on to.
Just give me a little bit this time, because I might have to take muscle relaxers.
A me little bit or a you little bit?
Well, less than a me little bit.
All right, half a dram.
Okay. Just because I might have to take muscle relaxers, and that does not mix with this. I'll tell you that right now.
So this is a 10-year. I think it's fairly new. I haven't seen it until the last couple of weeks, so I had to pick up a bottle. And
cheers.
They don't put out trash, so
no.
The nose is wonderful.
See, now that's one of the best bourbons I think I've ever had. I mean, that's exceptional.
Yeah, no ice or water needed.
No, and it's completely smooth. There's no burn.
This is a port sipper, y'all.
Oh, wow.
Now we just need a cigar.
Yeah.
We'll be back.
Yeah.
Keep an eye on that bottle, folks.
Yeah, well, just keep it streaming, and the moderators in the chat room can entertain you.
Oh, wow. If you like bourbon, add this to your list.
That is a very good
Hayden,
bourbon.
10-year.
Yeah, and that's rare to see bourbon older than 6 or 7 years. They don't typically age it that long. So bourbon has to be aged in virgin oak. It can't be used barrels like they use in Scotland, for example. Scotland buys all the the American oak barrels because they char them, and then their process allows for that. But bourbon has to be new oak, and it doesn't require as much length of time to soften because of that. And but to get a bourbon that's up there in like 10 years, unlike a Scotch, that'd be very young. In fact, I would call those painfully young. Scotch at 10 years is very hot, and I don't enjoy that as much usually. There's a few that I do, but you got to add water typically. But bourbon at 10 years, that's when it really, really gets mellow. But the oak starts to come out, and the tannin of the oaks really starts to come out as you go up. And there's even bourbons I've seen that have been up there in 20, 25 years, but it's rare to see because you don't typically need to. And they're usually very, very oaked in their composition. So this is exceptional. Thank you for sharing this one. This is a good one.
No problem. Sorry, they're dealing with I think we got our first troll. We haven't even started.
Oh, really? What are they saying? Let's see.
Oh, they're just
Tarot Destroyer.
Tarot Destroyer. Yeah. The moderators are all over. Thank you. Thank you, guys and gals, for that. Obviously someone hiding in their mother's basement needed something to do.
Really, I mean, get a life, okay? Get a life. It's not that hard. It's really not that hard. You just go out there, you get a job, maybe you find someone to fall in love with and start a family. It's really easy to get a life. So you're kind of pitiful, actually, Tarot Destroyer. You're kind of pitiful. But thank you for the entertainment. I'm in the mood to.
You woke up. The moderators are wide awake now, so appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you much.
Yeah, that was entertaining. Thank you so much for your stupidity. It's always nice that I get the affirmations from people like you. That when I get all pissy and angry about the experiences I have with how dumb people can be, I can actually prove it with everyone's a witness here to your stupidity. So well done. Yeah, it's going to be one of those kinds of shows tonight, isn't it?
Keyboard warriors. Gotta love them.
Oh, idiots. Oh, it's so funny.
Cowardly.
Yeah, it is cowardly. It is cowardly. It's like, get out of your parents' basement. That's the first step, okay? That's the first step. Easy to do.
Take a shower, put the Hot Pockets away.
Yeah. Just get a job.
Yeah.
All right, calling in from Australia, we have Father Chris Yates with us tonight. How are you doing, Father? Hopefully better than I am.
Yeah, I think so.
Good morning.
Pain, although, as I said to you in the social media chat, that Australia's done the same thing America's done, and you can no longer buy over the counter paracetamol and codeine. Sorry, whatever you call it.
Really? So you can't do it in Australia either?
No, but you can in the United Kingdom, and
Yeah.
I go there twice a year, so I stock up and bring it back with me. So,
Do you hide them, or do they give you trouble bringing
you-
it back in?
well, they probably would if they found it.
Okay, so you hide it. So it's like Cuban cigars. You hide it
every time now.
Yeah, yeah.
The jig is up
But
now.
obviously, it's not illegal. It's
Yeah.
not illegal to buy it in
Right.
the UK. So, but they did the same here. They banned it in 2018, and all it does is just make GPs. It turns them into drug dealers. It's just stupid, and it costs a lot more money. So, and then there's been some massive government inquiry as to why GP appointment times are so difficult to get hold of these days.
Hello.
Leave it to politicians to be that thick. So anyway, like I say, I only take it I've got like a toothache or one of those headaches that nothing else shifts, because I'm not a smackhead and know how to manage my own self.
Well, that's what gets me upset about it. I know people are upset with my little comments earlier in the week about drug addicts, but I'm sorry. I went through a whole week of pain because you people can't control your addictions. I don't have any addictions. I'm a responsible adult, and if I need a stronger pain medication to get through a particularly painful condition, I should be able to get it without my doctor thinking that I'm seeking a fix from some kind of legal fix by getting him to feel sympathetic to me.
The issue, obviously, the issue's been presented by the abuse of oxycodone in the case of America.
Oh yeah,
but they're not responsible for why you can't get it. That's because of government regulation.
Well, yes, that's true. I mean, there's a lot of different things, but my problem is it's the same thing with the guns. Okay, you got some lunatic who goes up and shoots up a shopping mall and kills a whole bunch of people, and now the government wants to take everybody's gun away because somebody can't handle it. So it's kind of chicken or the egg a little bit, and the culpability is on both sides. I think I really do.
But the nut sting from a non-American. Is like I said, and having gone with Jamie to a really good gun store near where you are, very good. I won't name it because I don't want to zero in on where you live. But
I live about 2 hours from there now, so
okay, yeah, fine.
Yeah.
But a great place. But yeah, the crazy thing from the outside looking in is that you could buy a 9mm handgun or a 45 handgun, but you can't buy oxycodone over the counter. It does seem a bit mad.
Oh, it's insane. Marijuana is less regulated in this country. It's easier to get marijuana than it is to get Xanax or oxycodone for a legitimate medical condition.
Well, these days, marijuana might be the better choice.
Well,
with all the crap they're putting that stuff.
That's probably true. We've got, this one of the things that really just irritates me about the entire medical profession's mentality is that everybody now is operating in fear. And we saw that with COVID, didn't we?
Yeah.
It's
Absolutely.
just everything was a fear response. Everyone was afraid to not do it. Everyone was afraid to do this, afraid to do that. Mm-hmm. And the doctors are afraid. And, so if we really want to blame someone, let's not blame the drug dealers. I'll take it back for a minute. Let's not blame the government. I'll take that back for a minute because government run by good people's not a bad deal. It's the lawyers. Let's face reality. Lawyers are the fucking problem for everything in our society. They should all be hung. Honestly, every lawyer should just be hung. Just get rid of them.
I kind of like mine.
I'm sorry. No survivors.
It's that interaction between lawmakers who are politicians and lawyers. I mean, a lawyer is doing their job to look for loopholes to apply
but they also
the law.
build
the
it
problem,
this way. They build it according to this.
Well, they do, but as someone, I worked for two federal senators in Australia. I can tell you that the people, like the governments that produce bills that become acts of parliament, they don't have a clue what those bills do.
Right.
Like, so it's this absolute, it's like sophistry. Here's what happens, right? And this is the drug abuse thing is a classic example of this. There's a crisis, right? Mm-hmm. Whether it's a crisis or not, when the anointed decide it's a crisis, right? Often, if you analyze it, actually that crisis has been getting better for years until they decide to solve it.
Right? Yeah, right.
But anyway, what you've really got is a news story So news story is, oh gosh, oxycodone's being abused, blah, blah, blah. Doctors are making a fortune from it. Here's the crisis. Politician says, vote for me. I'm going to fix it and do something about it. Then they draft a bill that does all sorts of things, most of which they've got no idea what it does. Then this thing becomes an act of parliament. And then the lawyers go, oh, actually, there's this, and there's this, and there's this, and there's this. And they point out all of the things that they had no idea, these politicians, because the politicians don't write it. They just, and then all of a sudden the unintended consequences kick in. And then there's an inquiry and a review. And and meanwhile, millions of people have to suffer pain because things have been regulated. So that's the system. And anybody who thinks it's all about getting the right kind of politician is absolutely mad. And so, in a sense, I understand your frustration with the lawyers, but lawyers are actually doing what they need to do, which is exposing bad laws. It's a horrible cycle.
I think it is a horrible cycle, and I think there are certainly lawyers that do that. Okay, but I think that also the majority of the problems today is the litigious society that was absolutely manufactured by lawyers. So it's
and that's particularly a problem in America.
It is an American problem
because of the way your legal system works.
Yes, and so, most of our politicians started out as lawyers too, which doesn't help.
That's true in England too. Most people most of the ministers in Parliament are barristers, right? So it is an issue.
It is different.
So I do share your disdain for lots of the legal profession.
Oh yeah.
But I don't blame a doctor for not prescribing if he thinks he's going to get sued.
Well, that's the problem. But see, you can't tie a doctor's hands behind his back like that. You're not a doctor anymore. Now you're just a pawn of the governmental system. And who is suffering? Your patients suffer, but you still want to get paid though. Yeah. Oh, they still want to get fucking paid. They have no problem taking your money, but they're not going to give you the medications you need.
Well, government's creating
I'm really in a bad mood tonight. I probably should have come on the air after all. I'm really in a bad mood tonight.
But governments create monopolies. They say, only these people can prescribe these drugs, for example. They'll restrict things to psychiatrists instead of GPs. Now, there might be good reasons. There might be good reasons for doing that, by the way. I mean, I'm not an expert on these things, but what it effectively does is it really reduces the number of people that you can go and see, and a supply and demand. Basic understanding of economics tells you, well, then it's going to cost you more to see a psychiatrist, right? Because they're going to be in more demand, and this is all government-created monopoly.
It is, and the funny thing is that with this problem here, it was the pain had gotten so bad. I was like, you got to go to the doctor, go to the doctor, go to the doctor. Say, okay, I'll go to the doctor. So I went doctor, paid my whatever it costs, and what did I come out with? The instructions to do everything that I already had. I did get a refill on my muscle relaxers, so that's good, I guess. But overall, there was nothing new, nothing that actually helped. By the way, it was actually taking the 800 milligrams of ibuprofen, which I could have done myself as well. But they give all this worthless advice. They still wanted to get that money. It's not like I can go back and say to my.
What you need is to have a friend who's a doctor.
Oh, I have those too. I hate them. I can't stand those friends.
And they can write you prescriptions.
Yeah.
That's the hack.
That's the hack, I guess. Yeah. They write you that stuff. No, I'm really down on the so-called professionals and the what it is, honestly, what it is. Okay, we can keep breaking this down further and further. Okay, not the drug dealers, not the government, not the lawyers. It's not the doctors. It's the for-profit it's for-profit mentality on things that are necessities for living. That's ultimately the problem, which is the immorality of it all. That's the immorality of it all. That's a type of usury as far as I'm concerned. It might not be classic usury, but it is usury. It is.
Well, the irony is if it was actually a truly free market in drugs, it wouldn't be a problem.
It wouldn't be a problem. You could afford it.
The problem is that it's a hybrid model where you've got government intervention that skews it. So, for example, I'm quite radical. I don't think we need an FDA, for example. I think the FDA should be obliterated.
Well,
people say,
anyway.
how are we going to make sure drugs are safe?
Oh, no, they get paid. They get paid to.
Yeah, I know. It's not in the interest of Pfizer to make a drug that's going to kill the people that buy it, is it?
Right. No.
You know, there's a natural market force for that.
Yeah.
And so, you know, but you don't need an FDA. And like you said, the FDA will approve things that actually are not very safe.
Well, we've already seen that too. I mean, you can't trust anything.
So
I mean, as long as profits involved, you can't trust it. You can't.
But
you
the
got to use
FDA
discernment.
are a monopoly. They create the monopoly because they say these are approved and these are not approved.
Yeah.
These have to be prescribed by a doctor. These can be prescribed by a chemist. So that's what I'm saying. You've got the worst of both worlds.
I'm just going to say that let's just start the show over again.
Good idea.
All right, let's go ahead and get into questions from the ether and get back on track here because I don't want to derail this show any further with my foul mood. Brandon, coming in from Tennessee, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing pretty good. How about now?
Oh,
you had
great.
a free show right there.
Hey, you know, we got to be entertaining sometimes. We always be intellectual and boring.
I think you need more alcohol, like just a little bit more.
Actually, alcohol's just going to make me peaceful. So
go ahead. Just have the rest of the whole bottle. Just have it to yourself.
I'm more sober when I'm not sober. Let's just put it that way. All right, let's go for our first question.
All right. So the first question comes from Danielle.
Okay.
She asks, in the film The Passion of the Christ, why does the camera show us several times a super ugly baby that looks like a wizened old man being held in a woman's arms?
Well, I think that was an artistic choice by Mel Gibson and his direction team to sort of create a bastardized mother and child, you know, something that is a mockery of the Virgin Mary holding her son. So ultimately what it was is a sort of a play on that. And it also is, I think, a bit of foreshadowing of the Antichrist, you know, talking about this in a context where you have this grotesque creature as it's depicted, you know, but it's actually has that creepy smile. Remember?
Yeah, I remember when I first seen it. It really kind of creeped me out.
It is. It's meant to be creepy because it's supposed to be sort of evocative of what is the devil really like. If we could create an image of the devil, you know, and obviously it's not going to be the classical representation with a tail, pitchfork, and horns, right. What would that be like? And it would be sort of this manipulative, sort of nondescript. You can't really even tell the gender of this thing. It's.
Well, you take the most innocent, you know, thing that human being, you know, the most innocent archetype, if you like, for humanity, which is a baby.
Yes.
You know, something which, you know, unless you really are a psychopath, people, you know, are you know, warm towards babies. It's built into us, so we look after them, because otherwise something that screams and keeps you awake for 2 years, you know, you might not be so kind to. Right. So something that is you know, the most sort of innocent image of humanity, and then you twist that. And that's a really good way of depicting, you know, the essence of the devil, right?
Yeah.
So it's to give that texture of the comparison between the Christ child and you know,
it is, and I think that's what made The Passion such a brilliant movie, and perhaps the best one ever done on the life of Christ. Not that it was, you know, as complete as some of the other ones, but it was definitely the most archetypally represented in a way that really gets you into Catholic theology and immerses you into the feeling of it. And I think, you know, using the ancient languages, all of that really just sort of drove the entire experience home. I'm looking forward to the sequel. Some might not even know there is a sequel coming out.
It's like the difference. It's like the difference between the Synoptic Gospels and the fourth Gospel, the Gospel of John. You know, the Passion of the Christ is more the fourth Gospel, right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it's playing with the philosophies and the.
It is.
Yeah,
and Gibson gets it. You know, I think he's a traditional Catholic too. He's into the whole Latin masses and all that stuff.
Latin mass Catholic.
He is, yeah. So I'm looking forward to the sequel. They're getting the whole cast back who's still alive. Unfortunately, the actor who played the Apostle John, I think, passed away recently,
right.
Which is a shame because he's such a good.
He did make a good John.
Yeah. But hopefully they can find someone that can replace him well.
Isn't it supposed to take place in the 3 days he's in
is.
hell? Yeah.
Well, it's not going to be just
the
on
3
that.
days
It's going to be somewhere between the post-resurrection appearances and the ascension.
Okay.
But I'm speculating that we might see the harrowing of hell.
I think Mel Gibson mentions
I would
it in
say.
one of his interviews.
Yes.
I've seen lately, the last few months or so.
I think
But
that would be
it's gonna
interesting.
It's going to be epic.
It is.
Yeah.
It's going to be epic. So that's what that is. Let's go to the next one, Brandon.
So the next question, since we're dealing with archetypes tonight,
Yeah.
if during an exorcism the demon gives the name Satan, is that the archetype that Satan represents, or the attributes of like the devil in tarot?
Well, any representation of these things are going
Good
to
question.
obviously come off of the archetypes that produce them. So the reason why there's sort of a characteristic devil or demonic creature that is this beastly thing with a tail and horns and vicious looking, that image that is invoked in us when somebody hears the word the devil or Satan or something, in art or wherever else you might find it, is because it comes from its preliminary archetype. Okay, so again, it is a continuation of the evolution of various archetypes. And we had that discussion, you and I today, Brandon, on the Nicolan Network concerning the Yetzer Hara. And you were asking about how, how did we arrive from the snake in the Genesis story, the snake that tempts Eve in the Genesis story, all the way to this beastly, Antichrist kind of creature. How do we arrive there? And is it the same thing or are they different? It's a good question. And the fact is they're both the same and they're both different. It depends upon the perspective from which we're coming from. So, ultimately, where is the source of the evil? Well, it's Yetzer Hara. That never changed. Whether you're Jewish or Christian, now Christians might not remember or even respect Jewish mysticism and theology, but the fact of the matter is, they're the ones qualified to really comment on it because it's their scripture. And the serpent in the Garden of Eden is not Satan or the devil in the Christian sense. It's Yetzer Hara. It is the proclivity of man to choose to do wrong, even when he knows he's doing wrong. And that is what messes up the world. It's why we have wars. It's why people get raped. It's why people commit murder and steal and everything else that you can think of, every horrible thing that happens in this world.
Fallen nature.
It's the fallen nature, and the Yetzer Hara comes out of us. We're the sort of the instrument of this very proclivity, and our choice to do the wrong thing is what leads to the fall. Okay, so they kind of create archetypal personifications for purposes of the story to try to talk about ineffable realities that are so spiritually beyond human comprehension that the only way to understand them is to put them into some kind of mythos, you might say. But myths are actually truer than history. Myths are truer than fact. And we've discussed
super
that.
True.
Super
They're
true.
like super true.
Super true. Like beyond true.
Yeah.
Yeah. You could say, it's a surreal truth, you might say. And
actually they have to be by nature, because if they weren't, they wouldn't last. They wouldn't be myths.
That's what makes them enduring.
They're only myths because they're remembered, because there's something so true about them that they are extendable throughout generations.
Exactly.
Yeah, Joseph Campbell's got a few books about that.
Yeah, he does. And Jung talked about it too. So you can see how it evolves from then. It starts out as that, then it evolves within the Jewish system to being more of the accuser in God's court in Job, where it is, as you could say, archetypally represented, man accusing himself. It's mankind actually looking upon himself and testing himself whether or not he can be acquitted of what he's guilty of or whether or not he is guilty. And so this archetype takes this form again in this personified projection of reality, and it's still Yetzirah though. It's just now it's a different form, and it's more removed from the more abstract principle in the Garden of Eden. By the time you get to the New Testament, you start including Zoroastrian influences, as we've talked about this season with other guests, JJ as an example. When we start looking at apocalypticism, which probably also came from Zoroastrian influence, then now it starts to morph into a more beastly characteristic. But how do we get to this now externalization of the Yetzirah? Prior, it's all internal, right? It's all internal reality. Now it's going into this external thing where we see the devil of the New Testament tempting Jesus in the desert. And this now takes on the characteristic of an external conversation. So where does that come from? Well, that comes from what happens when you have a perfect God incarnating an imperfect human nature, that the action of doing that will now separate, because of also that's the start of salvation as well. It's the catalyst that brings salvation. It starts there in the incarnation, because the first step to making us perfect is to begin to perfect human nature by incarnating it. So this is the first thing, the first step towards salvation. And that separates now the Yetzirah from us. Doesn't mean we're not influenced by it, but now it no longer lives within us. It's now external. And then it takes on more of the classic form of the devil. By the time you get to Revelation, it's evolved again. Now it's the beast. And now it's a choice, because what happens when you choose to become the beast? Well, now you're an Antichrist. Okay, so now you take on that persona. Antichrist, beast, the devil, Satan, the serpent, they're all Yetzirah. But they're all very different faces of Yetzirah, different expressions, different abilities. The serpent does not have the abilities of the Antichrist. The serpent doesn't have the abilities of the devil. There's certain risks that come on with the perfecting of humanity, because now there's more peril involved. Okay, now there's more to lose, and the price is one's soul. So you can't say that when you look at Christian theology and say, well, it's all a myth. And by myth in this sense, I'm talking like when people use the word myth in pop culture, they're not talking about it in the archetypal sense like we are. They're talking about it in the sense that it's a fiction.
Fairy story.
Yeah, fairy tale. That's not it at all. All the theology is super true, beyond true. But it doesn't mean these are literal histories. It doesn't mean that there's a historicity to any of it. There could be, and manifestations of it within history, but that's not the point. Whether it manifests that way or not doesn't make it less real. It will always be more real than the experience that we're going to have with it. But that's the seduction, isn't it? And this is what leads to people saying, well, the devil doesn't exist, because they can be easily seduced by, oh, if it's only an archetype, it's all in my head, then it's no big deal. Right. It's not real. That's the seduction. And that's exactly what the archetypes like to do.
Most.
Exactly. That's why it matters the most. So,
I mean, on a very practical level, when I've been involved in exorcism, my skepticism, which of course we're all supposed to be skeptics, right? We're not supposed to go, oh, I'm sure it's the devil, So, but my skepticism is peaked if that's the name that comes out, because that's kind of in Western culture and what everyone knows. So, if somebody says a very obscure kind of, one that only people that really, research these things would know, or it's in a different language, that's when I'm more convinced by that. I mean, if someone just says, when you go through the minor rite and people come up with the name, the devil or Satan, it's not to say that it might not be true, but, it doesn't, I don't cross the hurdle of skepticism when that name is mentioned.
No,
on a very practical level.
And honestly, it's actually, when you look at it from the archetypal vantage point, you realize just how much power you actually have over it. The power is always in the seduction. And the seduction is what gives it its power, because once you're seduced, then you feel like you're powerless, and then you give it whatever it needs to continue to proliferate. So,
and it's also why if you cooperate with that evil, you are culpable. Not you can't.
oh, you
the
are
devil.
absolutely culpable. Yeah, I mean, I think that's the biggest problem.
Still made the choice.
And the biggest lie that Christian churches today have promoted in the world is by making the devil a literal historical person. They have created the perfect scapegoat for their own misdeeds. Now no one's to blame except for the devil. It's all his fault. And I'm sorry, no, it's your fault.
You know, I can go ahead and add to that. I was at the bookstore today, which is why I was asking you all these questions, and I found this entire commentary of the King James version, your favorite version. And I went into the Genesis story, and it said, I took a picture of it so I don't misquote it in any way. Right here, it says, quote, Satan brought evil into the world. Here the deceiver undertook to alienate man from God.
We brought evil into the world.
Well, that would make the devil a creator.
Yeah.
Well, I told
the devil is not a
it's
creator.
so funny you say that. It's so funny you say that, because what did I tell you? What was my response to that, Brandon? That it's not Christianity you're referencing here. This is Zoroastrianism, Neo-Zoroastrianism. That's not Christianity.
It is.
Yeah. Because only
It heavily
Zoroastrianism.
influenced Islam too. Zoroastrianism really morphed into Islam. Yeah.
It did. It did. It influenced it, and not for the better. Because for those of you who are not familiar, Zoroastrianism teaches that there is a good God and an equally powerful arch nemesis, an evil God, and they're equal in power, and they're always fighting it out. And their battle takes place in the playing field of human experience, and we kind of suffer the consequences of it. This is absolutely not Jewish teaching. This is not Christian teaching. It's not even it's not even Muslim teaching. Even Muslims don't see it that way. Nothing is more powerful than God in all three Abrahamic religions, and yet Christianity is the most guilty. Christianity is the most guilty at turning the devil into a competitor. He can never be a competitor for God. How can a loser who lost before he even began be a competitor for God? It's such a ridiculous notion, but this shows the ignorance of Christians today.
Well, I think St. Augustine of Hippo, would describe, because nobody wants to deny the presence of evil in the world.
Right.
But, the idea that God created evil is not right. I think, my understanding of this, and so I'm already bringing it down.
You're talking about I create the light and I create the darkness. You talk about that line?
Yeah, and that basically what St. Augustine posits is that God only creates anything that's created. If you read the book Genesis, he saw that it was good. In other words, all things are created in goodness, but the human beings can degrade that goodness.
Yes,
we have the ability. We've been given not the same power as God, but we've been given a consciousness that can choose to degrade goodness. That's what sin is, basically. And so the extension of that is to say that even the most evil thing that exists on this earth, the fact that it has something, which is why it has to be a real thing, not just an idea, right? Ideas can be evil because they don't actually exist. They're not tangible. But the most degraded human being still exists because there is goodness in them. Mm-hmm. And that's why nobody's beyond the redemption of God, right? Because if you live and exist, then you can be restored. That's the whole, of course, it makes sense of the cross, right? But so the idea that God creates evil is not a right thing to say, but people can make a positive decision to try to destroy that which is good, and that is my definition of evil.
That's a good definition. I like it. I think,
as opposed to being bad, because we're all bad, but evil is when you set out to destroy something that is good.
Right. That's right. And we can even further conclude that once things have been perfected in the fullness of time, I'm not sure anything that happened before it's going to matter. anymore. So
I agree.
evil probably doesn't have much relevance beyond its current state. And so once it's gone, it served its purpose.
Yeah.
And maybe in some way you could
to use biblical language.
Yes.
These are the birth pangs of the new creation.
Yes, exactly.
Right? So
exactly.
and so the birth pangs of evil are there, but actually once Christ returns.
And we know that creation is a
place.
violent process. I mean, look at it from
Absolutely.
even an astrological point or astronomical point of view. Look at the Big Bang. If that is an origin point or a creation point for the universe, that was pretty violent. All right,
even things that people love about the natural world. I've said this on the show a few times.
Yeah.
The natural world, no matter how beautiful it is, and people like their David Attenborough shows, it's fundamentally fallen nature.
Fundamentally fallen.
Which is why look at this beautiful gazelle, and the next thing it's being eaten.
Yeah.
But to the lion, that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I'm eating tonight. So is my pride.
Exactly.
Full belly's a beautiful thing.
But in the new creation, when Christ comes, the lion will lie down with the lamb.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's the sort of the eschatological, which we've talked about a lot on the show, of it's both coming and not yet here.
That's right.
It's both here and not fulfilled.
Yeah.
When it is fulfilled, evil will have no place. There'll be no evil in the new creation.
No.
The shining city on the hill, but
someone's going to have to punch a hole into the fallen universe just to get all the cattle, because I still want the fatted calf at dinner. Even there, I'm not.
I tend to
I
agree.
find it hard to believe there's a heaven without meat.
Yeah, I'm telling you,
Amen.
there's going to be some way to get the meat. We got to kill something out there. All right, what's our next? I'm in a rare form tonight. I'm going to have to apologize to James when he comes on. All right, Brandon, what's our next question?
He can handle it.
So the third question comes from Val. She asks, can an animal be possessed? Unsure if this was covered before. Just watched an Eli Roth series called My Possessed Pet, and a medium said that horses were very susceptible, although each show had a different pet.
Okay, so in potential, in theory, yes, an animal can be possessed, but it would not be a likely occurrence because the sophistication of the energetic sophistication of such a creature is not at the level of that a demonic form requires.
I don't think there's going to be any Cujos.
That's the thing.
Running around.
No. So it's not something that would be
possessed is the wrong word. Used would be a better word.
Used would be better.
Because only a human soul has that capacity.
Correct.
An animal soul doesn't have that capacity, but they can be used by demonic forces.
Yeah, and I would say an animal that would show signs of this would be more of just a basic demonic attachment, in the same way that an environmental infestation would occur.
They might act rabid.
Obviously we have biblical evidence of this, but then again, it's through the action of something Jesus did. It wasn't a natural occurrence, but he did send demons into pigs, and they jumped off the cliff. But that had more than just literal meaning there. First of all, swine were a symbol of Rome. Okay, so it was sort of an action to show that he was going to clear out the swill of that was oppressing his people. Because what ended up happening, Christianity did conquer Rome, so that did happen. And then also, I think it was a more personal message to indicate that animals were, unlike how people see animals today. I mean, even today, legally, they still have this qualification. But I think people today, for the first time in any point in history, see a lot of their animals as almost like family members. This would be peculiar to the people of the ancient world. They would not understand that. And so animals were property.
Peculiar even 100 years ago.
Even 100 years ago.
We've become really sentimental towards animals.
We have.
A lot of this vegan movement is over sentimentality.
It's different than any time in history. So back in the ancient world, you have to see it in that context. Animals were property. And he was showing that he wasn't coming to everything had to go. You had to let it all go. You had to be completely unattached for the coming of the new kingdom. Anybody that was trying to hold anything, it's basically a retelling in a very symbolic way of the rich man who gets, who goes away weeping because he realizes that he can't do what Jesus asks. He's like, I want to follow you, Jesus. What do I need to do? Well, go back, sell everything you have, and then come follow me. And he's like, I can't do that. Well, and then there's no place for you. And that's when he gives us it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle motif, which is not actually a good translation of it. But that's another story. Anyway, it tells the point.
And it was about the love of money, right? Inordinate love of money. It wasn't about money itself.
No, but but he was so attached to his life. He wasn't able to give it up for Jesus. And
because he loved it more than he loved God.
Exactly.
And that was the problem.
And that's the problem. And so Jesus knew this and used it as an example to teach him and everyone else around. But that's the same thing with the message with the pigs, is to show that, your material possessions, and remember, cattle and animals, these were almost like currencies in the ancient world. All right, that became part of dowries and things like that. Mm-hmm. So it was very possible that people, well, back then they definitely would have understood that it was another way of saying that you're not going to be able to take anything with you. You have to be willing to give it all up for my sake, for the sake of the kingdom. So it was multiple messages in there. It had the least to do with possession. But to answer the question, it's more like an attachment. Father Chris is right. They're being used, but they're not really being possessed. I know you said, Brandon, you had one extra question. I think we have 6 minutes here before we go to break and start the next segment. So go ahead and ask it.
I gotta find it real quick. Where did I put it?
Well, you sent it to me in email. I don't know if you have easy access to that. I can bring it up if you need to. If you need me to.
Probably might be best. I can't find it.
All right. Let me see if I can bring up your email. Do you remember what time it was that you sent it over? It would have been your last one probably, right?
Yeah, it was today, a couple hours ago.
Oh, no, wait. No, you sent this on the Nicolay Network. It was a message that you put there. You put it in there. Yeah. Let me go and I'll retrieve it. Just give me a second. I appreciate everyone's patience here.
It's super clicking.
Yeah, I'm clicking the wrong thing too. Hang on a second. We got too many Vestiges After Dark pages here. I always click the wrong one. I click the archive when I mean to click. So you would have put this in content, right? I might not be able to find it. Wait.
Something about the Second Temple?
No, it wasn't Second Temple. There was a question he wanted to get in there. Here it is. Okay. You found a fourth question. It was on Facebook about the conversation about the Bible and the Catholic Church not acknowledging ghosts.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
that's not true.
Okay. So let me see if I can even bring up that comment so I can read it word for word from the person who asked it. And then I can answer it.
We'll have to check their sources.
I found it.
You found it? Okay, go ahead and read it.
Yeah.
She said, as for ghost hunting, I'm not sure how legit the interpretation is, but my understanding is the Bible doesn't acknowledge ghosts, nor does the Catholic Church. It mentions angels and demons, which is confusing, and then seeing a Catholic bishop on a ghost hunting show just added to my confusion. So what's the deal here?
Well, this is...
They got bad information.
Yeah, they definitely have bad information because the reality is that the church doesn't really have a teaching for or against the existence of ghosts. Okay, that's not really what its purpose is. Its primary purpose is to guide one towards salvation, which is the exact same purpose of the scriptures. Okay. So at the most, what I responded to this person at the most basic level, okay, 1 Samuel 28 and Matthew 14:26, both at least demonstrate that the authors of the Bible and the Bible themselves acknowledged the existence of ghosts, or at least there was belief in this, because these two, they're not talking about demons and they're not talking about angels in either of those two contexts. When the apostles saw Jesus walking on water, their first thought was, this is a ghost. And part of the reason why he has the nail marks in his hands, and Thomas wants to put his finger through them, is so they know that this is not an apparition or some kind of like trick. It's the actual body of Christ that was on the cross. It's the one that was, taken down from the cross, the one that was dead. So there was definitely an understanding in the ancient world that there's a difference between angels, demons, and ghosts. And I think just like today, people accepted the existence. If you believed in one, you typically believed in all three. It's only, again, in Protestant or mostly evangelical mentality that sort of limited it, and they use this idea, and he uses it on me here when he asks. He says, like, the Bible talks about only angels and demons. Well, first of all, that's not true.
Well, ghosts are referred to as the shades, correct?
Yes, the shades.
And that is mentioned in the Bible.
It is
on your translation.
But they'll get on you with that one by saying that, but that doesn't mean they can walk the earth. They're in Sheol.
But you see, even though he's a Catholic, even Catholics in the West are deeply affected by Enlightenment Protestantism.
They are.
Can't not be, because it's formed who we are. But also, to answer the second part of the question, or the accusation, I think more than a question, neither of you two are on that show to help with ghost hunting.
That's true.
No,
You're
we're
called
not.
there
We're the resolutionists.
because there's somebody there who they think might be under demonic influence.
Correct. In every case,
actually,
I get
you're
called
not
for
there
that.
to be ghost hunters. You're there to be pastors to people who are in trouble. So actually, that part of the question is null and void, because you're not there. With your I can't remember the names of the devices now. Doing what Zach does. You're there to be pastor to somebody who's suffering.
Exactly.
That is the role of a bishop.
That is, and that's what we go to do. But I concluded by saying that the biblical concentration on specifically angels and demons is due to the fact that the Bible is a manual for the best attainment of salvation. It is not an encyclopedia for everything in and beyond creation. So just because something is not in the Bible does not mean that it doesn't exist. I don't even understand why people keep drawing this same erroneous conclusion every time. Why would you think that just because something's not in the Bible that it doesn't exist? That's not even logical.
I'm not in the Bible, but I do exist.
Right.
Well, I'm not in the Bible, and I'm not sure if I exist or not. But we'll find out. We'll find out on the second segment here when we come back after this next break. James Ferrera coming up. Don't go away.
Yay.
overdue. You're uninvited. You wanna hold me close, but I know what you have to. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Why are you hiding? Tell me what must I do? Come to you, come to you. You're mine, mine, mine. It's right, right, right. It's right, 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 right now. Why are you hiding? Tell me what must I do? Come to you, come to you. You're mine, mine, mine. It's right, right, right. It's right, 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 right now. Why are you hiding? Tell me what must I do? Come to you, come to you. I tried to let go of all of the nonsense that you put me through. I give it all to you. I do it all for you. Maybe this feeling's overdue. You're uninvited. You wanna hold me close, but I know what you have to. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Why are you hiding? Tell me what must I do? Come to you, come to you. You're mine, mine, mine. It's right, right, right. It's right, 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 right now. Why are you hiding? Tell me what must I do? Come to you, come to you. You're mine, mine, mine. It's right, right, right. It's right, 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 right now. Why are you hiding? Tell me what must I do? Come to you, come to you.
Welcome back, everybody, to Vestiges After Dark. We're getting ready now to start the show with tonight's topic, archetypes and how to work with them, interpret them, and how they affect our lives. Part 2 from last week with a brand new guest, James Ferrera. You're really going to enjoy this. Father Chris and Brandon Milan will be back for the third segment to take your questions with our guest and whatever might be on your mind. If you want to call into the show, now's the time to do it, although we're not taking calls till the next hour. That's 718-362-6380. Remember to enter PIN number 855-4111 to get placed into queue. You can also call international free with Skype, Eye of the Seer. We'll be back in just a moment. Okay, see, I've had my chance to finally relax after the fervor of the first segment. I think I've chilled out a bit, and well, I don't apologize for anything because it's been a rough week, and
say what you feel, man. Say what you feel.
I've never been one to not do that. That's for sure. But tonight we've got such a great. Fantastic. I've been looking forward to this. And we tried to do this over the summer as one of our summer specials, and we got called to Ghost Adventures and had to be moved to this season. So I am very, very happy to welcome James Ferrera, who has studied tarot with Letitia Barber, author of Tarot and Divination Cards, a visual archive at Morbid Anatomy, and Naha Amardi, my tongue doesn't want to talk tonight. Naha Amardi, founder of 22 Teaching School of Hermetic Science and Magical Arts. Ferrera hosts Tarot Talk Show on Morbid Anatomy's Patreon, where he draws tarot cards to guide the conversation with his guests. Ferrera's approach to tarot is a hybrid of scholarship and intuition. Ferrera is also an award-winning publicist in film and television. He has worked on modern-day genre hits such as *Malignant*, *The Conjuring 2*, *The Conjuring*, *The Devil Made Me Do It*, *Annabelle Creation*, *Annabelle Comes Home*, *The Nun*, *The Curse of La Llorona*, *Lights Out*, *Insidious* Chapter 3, *Sinister 3*, and Stephen King's *The Boogeyman* and *Salem's Lot*. Ferrera is also the founder of Pookie Helps, www.pookiehelps.com, and you can also follow that account. It's a wonderful cat of his. We'll talk about
Pookie is awesome,
tonight.
y'all.
We'll talk about Pookie
awesome.
tonight. On Instagram, it's at Pookie Helps, through which he sells handmade Pookie bags to raise money for
awesome.
animal rescue. Yes, I was able when I was doing.
I wasn't aware of this. This is cool.
Oh yeah, I'm telling you. When I got called to do or to help with the Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It. That's why I met James, and I was asked to come out and bless the set, and was called back to help with even some of the. I guess it was like some of the script that they wanted me to check out. So it was a very interesting time, and we really hit it off. We spent all day in his office, and we even did some tarot cards on one of the days. So I think you're in for a really interesting time tonight. Let's welcome James to the show. How you doing tonight, James?
Hey, James. Good to see you.
It's good to see you guys too. I'm doing great. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm so happy to have you here. I really am. It's I was on your show, I guess, a few months ago, and we had such a good time, didn't we? And it's like, you got to come on here, and it's a completely different kind of experience. But we talk about archetypes here a lot, and your work is all about archetypes. It's kind of foundational to the entire industry of what you do. You're constantly inundated with them. You're working with them. And now you have sort of discovered another side of it with tarot. So I guess let's get started with that part of your journey, and then let's just see where it takes us.
Yeah, I mean, well, I mean, I have to credit you in large part, even though tarot has been something that has been a part of my life for over 2 decades. It hasn't really been integral to my life and my path until about the last, within the last 2 years. And part of that had to do with the day that you came into my office in Atlanta and did a reading for me, and it was really profound because it did what tarot always does, which I didn't know until later, which is reveal the truth. Somehow,
whether you want to hear it or not.
Yeah, whether you want to hear it or
whether you
not.
want to hear it or not.
Yeah.
Yep.
But you need to.
Yes, sir.
And that's one of the things as well that I've learned as a reader is that you have to give those messages. You're not, as a reader, you're not interpreting who should hear what. You're a vessel for relaying a message. And, that has been a really profound discovery for me that I'm capable of doing that. But because there's something more to it than just the archetypes in the cards. I mean, anybody can look at the cards and see the archetype of a mother in the Empress or the father in the Emperor, and in the other characters. But the cards tell a story and they listen to the moment that's happening between the reader and the querent. And you really opened that back up for me when I thought it was lost, because that reading that you did for me, it changed my life because it exposed some toxicity in my life that I didn't want to acknowledge and needed to. And it was painful. It wasn't, as you say, Amy, it wasn't something that I wanted to hear. So that was pretty cool. And that got me stumbling back into the road of tarot. And then what sort of tipped me fully back over into it was reading a book by Taschen called Tarot. It's part of their Library of Esoterica series. And I just randomly, I was drinking on my birthday, which happens to be New Year's Eve, and I was on Instagram and I was like, oh, that looks interesting. I think I'll order that.
Yeah.
And it was one of the few things I've ordered in that state of mind through Instagram that was worth the money.
Worth the money.
Yeah. And it was the artwork that I responded to initially. And I still do respond very strongly to the artwork in the cards. And that brought me back. The next deck that I got wasn't the deck that brought me fully into understanding the archetypes in the tarot, but it led me along that path. And now I have a collection of over 700 decks, but
that's wonderful.
But also,
I have one deck you do not have right here.
Which one is that?
That can be
mine.
remedied.
This is the only one of its kind.
Is that you made that deck?
Yeah, this is the one that we've been working on with my students.
Right.
2 years.
Yes, you mentioned that.
So yeah, there's it's called the Esoteric Mysticism Oracle, and
I think you'll really like it.
I think you'll like it
especially
because what it is it's a simplified tarot to the very basic. It's the very basic raw archetypes, and it's not made to replace the tarot, although you could use it as a standalone deck. It is designed to be a supplement or qualifier deck to helping to generate an archetypal theme to your reading. You know how sometimes you'll do a reading and you're really not sure, what does this mean? I'm not really sure what it's getting at. And a lot of times when that happens, people get tempted to ask the question again, which you should really actually never do. And you might add different cards to see if it clears up, which is fine. I mean, there is a practice of using qualifiers, but I thought, what if we could have the tarot talk back to itself, almost like an echo chamber, create a deck that does this. And so for the last 2 years, my students and I have been working on that very thing. And so what I did is I generated a list of all the primary archetypes, and then I ran them by my students, and then my students were able to put in input whether or not they felt that there was an archetype that might be missing from that list. And if there was, we added it. And then we created 10 different pieces of art for each archetype. And then nobody got to see them. I did all the art with a computer. I tried to get a real artist, but I could not get somebody that could work at this schedule. It needed to be done quickly. So we used AI, and then using my prompts from my book. Okay. And then it would generate 10 different pieces of art based upon those prompts. And then my students would look at them for the first time in class, and then they would choose whatever one they felt spoke to the archetype the best. And then whatever ones were voted for, we combined into one card by using all of the elements and mixing them together. And it created the ultimate archetypal deck. It would cut to the point where it felt as if the deck was creating itself by virtue of the interaction.
Yeah, the further in we got, the more it's almost like the AI was learning what we were needing, and it was responding in kind. It was very interesting.
It was very interesting, and it's exactly as you said. It almost felt like the deck was talking to us. Yeah,
it was basically showing us what we needed to see. And
so I have not. This is the prototype. It was the first copy that I had done, just to make sure. There's a few things about it that I'm needing to change, but I'm going to put it into a basic production for my students, and I'm going to get a few extra copies. And if you want one, James, I will send them to you, and you'll have one of the rarest decks in the world.
I would very much like that.
Yeah.
I would like to see. It sounds fascinating. I want to comment on something that you mentioned, though. I'm one of the things that when I was really first starting to learn, I was the first deck that I really responded to was the Wild. What is it? The Wild Unknown.
Okay.
And Kim Kranz, in her guidebook to the deck, she said it's very simply written, very easy to read and understand, and so it spoke to me most clearly of anything that I had read up to that point. Uh-huh. And she said, if you want to learn how to read tarot, go out and get your tarot read by as many people as you can, and look at the different styles that people read in, because nobody reads in the same style. Right. And so I started to do that, and I found a reader that I really liked and told her that I had a few decks, and she said, don't go down that road. Don't go down that road. Get one deck, learn that deck that you respond to, and that's how you're going to be able to learn tarot. And so I considered that, and it just didn't work for me, because I'm so drawn to the artwork, and I'm so drawn to the different methodologies that people have when they approach creating a tarot deck, and the variations that they have for why they're creating that tarot deck and what it should give to the world of reading. I kept buying decks, and what really worked for me was laying them all out on a table, particularly choosing one card, usually from the major arcana, and laying out that archetype from all of the different decks that I wanted to compare. And when I did that, I began to see a lot more entry points into that archetype, and how the artwork built upon, in a way that you're talking about with your deck, how those different elements of all the different decks, when I brought them together in my mind, looking at all the cards out there, made a more full understanding for me and access of the card. I still, no matter how many decks I have, I still read with primarily one deck, the deck that feels at home for me. So I feel like I'm true in both senses to the advice of that reader. Yeah.
I think part of it might also be the fact that because of the work that you do, you're going to be more exposed to the different variations of these archetypes than the average person would. And it doesn't strike me as unusual that you would sort of go against the traditional advice. I mean, it's good advice. I actually do more or less teach that same principle. I've been teaching tarot for 30 years in one capacity or another. And I can say that it is definitely for the average student, it's best to find that deck that really speaks to you and to stick with it for your readings, particularly just for the sake of developing a relationship with those archetypes as they're presented there. However, you're not like the average person. You don't do an average job. It's not a typical kind of situation that you're working within. And so that exposure, I think, is going to sort of open up a lot of your potential. And maybe I think on some subconscious level, you're feeling limited by just sticking with one. And I kind of get that because my whole life is archetypes too, but for completely different reasons than yours. I've purchased decks that I only ever intended to ask one question of. And I bought it to ask that question. I had no intention to ever use the deck again, and I haven't. I've got several decks in there. I don't have 700, but I have a lot. And there's a few in there that have been used once with the intention to only use it for that one question. But most of the time, I use the Crowley Toth deck because that is the one that spoke to me first. It's what I teach my students on. And I even tell my students, look, this doesn't have to be your deck, but in class, these are the archetypes. This is the way, when we talk about these archetypes, we're going to use these iterations of them. And as you become more fluent in the language, then you can branch out and just find which ones speak best to you. So I think it is a combination of both that works best. And I like I like what you do with it, and I think it's fantastic. You got 700. I mean, I follow you on Instagram and I'm seeing all these different images that you put up from time to time. You find decks I didn't even know existed, which I think is brilliant.
Well, and some of that is in, I have to credit some of the people that I follow on Instagram as well, who are posting decks that I've never seen. And then I go down that rabbit hole of where do I find this deck? And, is this deck in print? And, oh, it's not. And can I afford it? Because it's been out of print for 20 years and there were only 300 copies made. And it's this whole crazy, journey, I suppose, of acquiring decks, but it's not acquiring the decks for the sake of acquiring them. And there's a part of me, listen, my sun sign is Capricorn, which is the correspondent is the devil in the tarot. And as I began to learn what the archetype of the devil in the card, and I read with the Rider-Waite-Smith deck primarily. And as I learned that, what that character means, what it does in terms of holding down me being chained, to this demonic figure that really doesn't hold any power over me, that I don't allow it to hold over me. But I feel that sort of burden of that birth card with my decks, because I see decks and I'm like, I want that deck, and do I really need it? No, I don't. But I do use them, and I like to, sometimes I really enjoy reading with multiple decks together, pulling cards from 2 or 3 different decks or more, and sometimes mixing Oracle and tarot decks that seem to make sense together when I'm asking a question or just looking for insight. And I wanted to comment on something that you said. I know it was veering a little bit away from the topic of archetype, but bring it back whenever you want.
Yeah.
You talked about using qualifiers and people pulling qualifier cards, and people also sometimes refer to them as looking for clarification.
Yes.
And there's some controversy in the circles that I've studied in where that's concerned. I sometimes, not sometimes, if the reading demands it, I pull more cards.
Yeah.
And it's not because I'm not getting the message, or it's because there's more to the story.
Yes.
Right? I'm not looking for somebody or some card to make the story it's told clear or clarify it. I'm looking to reveal the full story in the cards that I'm laying out. So if I'm doing a 3-card spread and the story's incomplete, then I'm going to pull the cards until the story's complete. And I just think that's, I don't like calling them clarifiers or qualifiers, because for me, that's not what I'm doing. And I'm listening to the cards in the same way that the cards are listening to me or to the person that is in the room that I'm reading for. I was in Ireland over the summer, and I went to a reader in Dublin, kind of off of a whim. My husband and I were talking about psychics and sort of the neon sign roadside psychic, or New York,
with the big red hand or something.
Street.
Yeah.
And we were walking down the street as we were having this conversation, and lo and behold, there, in a basement, garden entrance, dungy looking little staircase was psychic tarot reader, and I took a picture of it. And then I looked her up, and she had a cute little picture walking her cat and her dog outside, and she sounded really nice. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go and see her. She seems actually legit. And she was. So what I found fascinating, and I love going to other readers because I love seeing how other people read, and it validates me in how I read, because I know I don't have to then read a certain way. I read how I read, and that's valid. But the way that she read blew me away. I had never been to anybody who read like her. Card. She was throwing cards on the table and telling the story that she went through the deck like 3 times, I would say.
Yeah.
And she didn't pull the entire deck, but she was pulling cards like crazy, telling me, and she was really good and she was accurate. So, I mean, I just wanted to comment on that because I think it's interesting that sometimes I feel that people limit themselves in the message that wants to be heard by building a construct around how to hear the message.
Yes. I think you are really, I mean, you're touching on, I think, one of the fundamental risks of tarot reading, and that is that ultimately it's a mirror. And it will be more than happy to comply with reflecting whatever you want. So I think we might have even talked about this on your show. If there's something that you ultimately desire, then it won't have any problem showing you that if that is what is foremost on your mind. Likewise, it will sometimes show you your greatest fears. So if you ask a question, if you're, let's say a person's marriage is in crisis and they're worried that they could end up divorced. If you were to, do a tarot reading, and you're really hoping that the divorce doesn't happen, the reading might show you, you're going to get the Sun card, the Universe card, everything's going to be okay. Two of Cups, whatever. Or if you're really afraid when you go into the reading that you're going to end up divorced, you're going to end up with the Tower and, all this other stuff. And neither one is true. It's just reflecting your ambitions, your fears, your desires. All this stuff gets put into it because you're interfering with the process. I like what you said there about listening. So there's something definitely to be said for the style of tarot reading that you do, which is different than my own. But I respect your process of it, and I have actually used it on some occasion to just basically just go where the cards take me. And I think that is important to do the listening part. What I teach my students to do is to absolutely, without question, clear the question from the mind after they reach a certain point of, I guess when it reaches a certain point of dissipation. So at first you want to make the question, formulate the question, have it solid in your mind, make it clear, and don't give the archetypes any power over the question. In other words, make sure that the question is formulated in a way that it's not going to come forward and be written around your question to, again, seduce you into some kind of answer that's not accurate. So you want to make sure that you're always maintaining power. So what does that mean? Well, instead of asking, am I going to lose my job? Ask, what will happen with my, what is the likely potentials that will happen in my job if I continue doing A, B, or C? So take 3 or 4, whatever courses of action you think you can take. Reduce down your question to whatever actions you think are within your grasp, and then pull a direction with the tarot for each one of those. That way you're not leaving it open to the tarot to decide your what energy you have. You're telling it by your actions what archetypes you're going to be dealing with for each of those particular situations. So that's number 1. Number 2 is, once you've made that question, get rid of it and then shuffle the cards. Then do it with an empty mind completely, with the only intent being that the cards are going to speak to what you need to know. And that's it. And you just do that with a clear mind. I sometimes teach my students to use a mantra, anything that can help to keep them focused, but not thinking about the questions. Because as soon as you think about the question, particularly if it's an emotional question, an evocative question, something that really matters to you, those emotions are going to influence the outcome. And people are going to be like, it lied to me. I've had students say, it lies. All it does is lie. It's like, no, you're not reading correctly. You're not releasing. You're giving it too much power. It's just reflecting back at you. So I think your method there, the listening, is kind of the way that you're helping to formulate that kind of accurate relationship with it. So I like that style. I really do, James. It's kind of brilliant, really, to read that way.
One of the other things that I think is important for me in the way that I read as well is I need to listen to what the cards are saying, but I need to allow the cards to listen to the conversation as well and to respond to that, because information is being revealed in most of the readings that I do. I don't typically do blind readings where someone is coming in and they either won't ask a question or they won't say anything once the question is said. I mean, I can, and
Yeah.
maybe I will from time to time, but that's not the way that I find helpful.
Well, that reduces it down to fortune telling, doesn't it? I mean, it's,
Yeah, well, it does.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it does.
Yeah.
I think, and I just don't think it's as productive. So when I'm having a conversation with somebody and I lay down the first card, first of all, I don't typically lay down, okay, we're going to do 3 cards. And lay down the 3 cards, reveal the first card, talk about it. Yeah. I lay down a card, and then as we're talking, I continue to shuffle because the cards are listening. That's what I feel.
Mm-hmm.
The cards are listening, and they're listening to the conversation as well. And I think it's a much more powerful reading when I allow the cards to listen and I listen to what the cards have to say as well. So that's one of the things that I do when I read.
Yeah.
But you know, and the other thing is, the woman that I went to in Dublin, who was very good and really fun to have read for me. I don't know where the end of that story was. I think she could have kept going on long past the 60 minutes or whatever it was that we had together. Whereas for me, when I'm pulling I don't want to say additional cards, when I'm pulling cards waiting for that story to be told, I feel like there's a point at which it ends. If I'm intending to pull 3 cards, but the 3 cards don't tell the story, and I pull the next one, it informs what's been told or revealed, but it doesn't land squarely somewhere. I'm avoiding the words, you know, solution or resolution, but it doesn't land somewhere yet. Maybe it's the 5th card or the 6th card. It always lands somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
and I know it when it does.
So you don't
And I
really
don't
use
need to
spreads
continue
then.
pulling cards.
You don't really use spreads. It doesn't sound like.
I mean, I do sometimes.
Uh.
I did a 1-day workshop with Leticia last month, I want to say, for the Celtic Cross. I had never done the Celtic Cross. I mean, I know it's a classic,
It
right?
is a classic.
And
Yeah.
I wasn't intimidated by it. I just
I think it's
felt
too much.
like I didn't. What's that?
I think it's too much, personally. I think it's way too much, the Celtic Cross.
Well, I mean, I just didn't always feel like I had enough time to spend to learn or access it, or you know, I don't know. But I did this workshop, and we I mean, Leticia is amazing anyway, and she's so knowledgeable, and her background in art history is incredible,
Yeah.
and the access that she has to the cards through that lens of art history is incredible. So she's like laying the groundwork and then taking us through as a group, and we're laying out the Celtic Cross. Brian, I have almost never had a reading that I've done for myself that was that profound, and it moved me to tears. I was so, I'm getting a little emotional just thinking about it, you know, and telling the story. It was fascinating, and it gave a fuller picture. For whatever reason, if it was more cards or the way they were laid out and what they signified in that particular spread. But so I will do spreads. I don't want to feel bound by them.
You don't like the limitations of it. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
I've also taken classes with a really amazing creative person who is also a deck creator named Coleman Stevenson. And I've taken several classes with her. She's a creator of the Dark Exact Tarot, the Vitriolic Tarot, and a couple of other decks with some collaborators. And I lost my train of thought. Sorry.
No, you're fine. No, it's okay. I can understand.
It'll come back to me.
It takes you in all sorts of directions, this work.
Yeah.
Zoom. I'm going all over the place in my brain. Yeah, sorry. I'm just plugging my computer into the power source right now. So Coleman is also the author of 3 books of tarot spreads. She's also a poet, and she's an artist, and she's a really interesting person. And so she's putting together a 4th book of spreads, and her books of spreads draw other artists in, almost like a magpie deck where you've got a magpie spread book. And she asked me if I had any to potentially contribute. And there's a spread that I don't know if anybody else has ever thought of it or done it. So if they have, credit due to you. But it's a spread that I developed for myself called that I call the Hermit's Hourglass. And the spread is basically laid out like an hourglass, where 3 cards at the top, then 2, then 1 in the middle, and then 2, and then 3. And
interesting.
Each of the placement of, and there is a way that I have of laying them out that isn't just from top to bottom or bottom to top. But each of the placements of the card doesn't have a specific, rigid, defined role in the reading. There's some guidance that I've noted with it, but for the most part, it's a spread that I've developed that you don't just sit and read. It wouldn't be something that you would read necessarily for somebody else.
Uh-huh.
It's something that sits out for a day or 2 or 3. And I keep coming up with different ways. I think I've got like 10 different options of reading the cards laid out in this way. And it's kind of astonishing because the way that this spread works is by not being defined in advance. There's a shape to it, and there's a movement or a variety of movements that can occur within it, but it's not bound. In the same way that you take an hourglass and turn it over, and the sand is going to flow, but it's not going to flow exactly the same way every single time.
Sure.
It looks like it is, but every grain is moving differently or moving at a different speed than it did before. And so it's bound by a shape and it has a function, but it doesn't do it the same way every time. And even if you have like a 3-minute egg timer or whatever it may be, it's not going to be exactly the same amount of time every single time.
Sure.
So, so that's another way even that
So are you saying
a
like
spread that I work with, I may change.
Are you saying like when you lay this hourglass spread out that you might put like there's no set numbers to the positions. You just kind of lay them out differently every time as well? Is it?
No, I do have a layout, the way that where I put, like there is a card number 1, 2,
Okay.
3, 4. That doesn't mean that I might be sitting there doing the spread and go, this card feels like it should go here instead of here.
I want to
today,"
make sure. Okay.
you know?
Right.
But again, there is a map. Much like the map that we have in general for our lives, that we think our life is moving in a particular direction, or we want it to move in a particular direction. We think we know how to get to our destination. But if we have a destination in mind and we allow ourselves, and we know where we want to go, but we allow how we get there to develop along the way, two things, well, probably more, but several things can happen. We'll get to our destination the way that we set out. That's probably pretty unlikely, but it could happen.
Mm-hmm.
We'll get to our destination in a more interesting way and see and learn things along the way that we might not have otherwise known about if we're open to taking a different road, right? Taking the back streets instead of the highways, or whatever the way may be that speaks to us or claims us. And the other thing is, we might not get to the destination at all because something else came along that drew our attention, demanded our assistance, fulfilled us more than we could have imagined we would be because we didn't see it.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. This is a weird theme that's coming out tonight for me because
it's a weird night, James.
It's talk about all these different ways of,
It's interesting.
not being committed to anything in any way. It's very un-Capricornian of me.
Well, you're a different kind of Capricorn. I'd love to do your chart one day and just kind of see where those variations are. Because as a general rule, I don't typically get along too well with Capricorns. I really don't. But I have a Capricorn moon. That's why. See, my moon's in Capricorn, and my moon causes a lot of trouble in my chart. So Capricorns tend to fixate on that energy and cause me trouble. You're not like that. And you're one of the first that I've ever met that was not like this. And so it'd be interesting to see what's offsetting your Capricorn nature, because you're I see some of the traits, and you definitely have the physical characteristics of a Capricorn. Cancer, I'm a Cancer, so Cancers have this moon face, and she's a Cancer too. We're both like the round head. Capricorns have a longer face, and more jaw and a very distinctive facial features, and they're usually very movie stars are typical. It's not an uncommon thing because they got that very strong characteristic,
structured,
very structured,
yeah.
which is distinct. Kind of like I think of as like the Brown Derby. Remember the Brown Derby restaurant with the all the little
at Disney? Heck yeah.
Well, I'm talking about the Disney one has it, but the original one too, the Hollywood one, has those little caricatures. I forget what they call them. They're not really caricatures. Are they? I guess they might be called that. Yeah. But they always accentuate all of the facial structure. So Capricorns usually have very distinctive features. Cancers tend to look a lot like each other because of the moon shaped face. There's something going on with your Capricorn that's unique and connecting you. So I'd love to see where it falls and how it's interacting with the other aspect. Have you ever had your chart done?
Yeah, and it's funny. I'm just concluding an astrology class right now.
Oh, interesting.
22 teachings.
Yeah.
So
that's right.
I'm no expert, and I'm still trying to make sense of all of the information that was presented to us, which was an incredible amount of information, and connected as well astrology to the tarot, which was a really great access point for me. But yes, so I know, I have an ascendant Scorpio, and
okay.
I know there's a lot of Sagittarius in my chart, but I can't remember off the top of my head. And I don't know, I'm not experienced enough to read my chart. But when I look at it on paper, it kind of makes sense. The type of, when I was younger, I never thought of myself as a Capricorn. It didn't really make sense to me. But as I grew older and I became more concerned about my place in the world and being able to have my greatest fear when I was a kid, one of my greatest fears was winding up homeless and penniless, when I was an old man. And I suppose that could still happen, but it seems very unlikely now. But it's still a little bit of a
that's
fear
Capricorn-y.
there.
I mean, that is
Right.
yeah,
So
that's very Capricorn.
That's what I mean. I've become a little bit more like, as I've grown, I've become more Capricornian in that way. But I think of that mountain goat, like it's sure-footed and it wants solid ground and everything, but it also leaps across chasms and it takes risks, and it's up there at the heights where it could fall and plummet to its death. But the way, and I want to take risks and do things, that maybe aren't defined by the role that I've taken in life as a film publicist.
Yeah.
But I'm assessing constantly, where am I going to land? I know where I want to land. I'm going to look at it from every direction. I'm going to calculate. I'm going to survey. I'm going to figure it out. And then I'm going to leap to give myself I still might not land where I want to land, but to give myself the best chance of doing so. And I think that's something as well that served me as a publicist in my career, because one of the things that we have to do constantly is anticipate every possible thing that could go wrong.
Right.
You're planning for what can go right and how you want to direct the conversation or spotlight it. But in doing so, you're in your mind, you're figuring if this goes wrong, what could happen? And then what would we do? What is the contingency? It's all about that. And I've taken that to every part of my life, even when it comes to, traveling and getting to the airport early and that kind of thing.
Be prepared, James.
You might hit a traffic jam on the
just
way.
be prepared. Yeah.
Well, you can't
Not
really
gonna
take
get
the
there.
Earth sign out of the sign. I mean, you really can't. I mean, it's always going to have that foundational stuff. But Capricorns are definitely the most interesting of the Earth signs, I think, because they are the ones that take the risk. You'll never see a Taurus taking risks the way a Capricorn can. But they're methodical risks. They're not, it's not like gambling. It's more like stock market investment and then having like several degrees in economics to be able to back it up. It's that kind of risk taking. It's like, usually it's just a very, very calculated, process, but they do things, I've seen a lot of, just again, not to pick on Taurus, but, they can get kind of stuck, Capricorns, I don't really see get stuck. When they're ready for a change, they make a change, and the whole world has to get out of their way to do it. So it's interesting to see. I think we got a couple minutes here before the break. I'd like to know, what are your thoughts on being a film publicist and how having this exposure to the various archetypes, and particularly dark movies. I listed off a lot of the movies you've worked on.
Yeah.
You're definitely into, you've worked a lot with horror film concepts. So these are heavier archetypes than what you typically would see. How do you think that's influenced your interaction with the tarot, or has it enhanced it, or has it made it more challenging, or has it had no effect at all?
That's a great question. And, one that I want to assess and think about before I answer. No,
Let's do this. Let's go ahead. Let's take our break. Think about that. When we come back, we'll get your answer. How about that? Does that sound good? All right. We'll be right back here at our last break. And when we come back, we'll be taking your questions also. So I'll have that number up on the screen shortly. And we will be taking questions from the chat room. Don't go away. Welcome back, everybody, to the third and final hour of Vestiges After Dark. We've been talking with James Ferrera about his exciting journey into archetypes and his work with the tarot, as well as how it relates to his job as a film publicist. It's actually very interesting, and we're going to find out his answer here when we come back, and also take all of your questions. Jamie's been looking at the chat. Looks like quite a few questions for our guest tonight, or for us. And but we, of course, would prefer you call into the show so we can talk directly with you. That number to call is 718-362-6380. That's 718-362-6380. Remember to enter PIN number 855-4111 to be placed into the queue. And if you're international, you can call us free on Skype by dialing Eye of the Seer, EYEOFTHESEER. We'll be right back. You know, speaking of in the first hour about animals being more like family members than property, as it's been mostly represented throughout all of history and recent times. You know, I have to say that I have my cat Heathcliff, and James has his Pookie. We need to talk about Pookie, James. But before we get to Pookie, have you had some thoughts about how your work in film publicist has affected your relationship with the tarot?
Yeah. So I highlight a lot of my work in sort of the darker stories that are told that I've worked on. You know, I mean, I have worked on other things.
Sure.
Like Milk. I worked on Milk, and I worked on Promising Young Woman, and I recently worked on a film with an incredible director that I also had on my talk show. Her name is Trish C. A film called Sitting in Bars with Cake that have nothing to do with the supernatural,
sure,
but still have dark elements to them and archetypes in them. But and Trish is a tarot reader, by the way.
Oh.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun to work on that film. Behind the scenes, I still had this world that was burgeoning.
Yeah.
But particularly, I think, in a particularly strong way, the films that deal with what we call horror or genre stories and narratives, I think have, I mean, I'm still formulating the answer to this. I'm still thinking about it because I haven't really thought about it that way. And I think it's a really interesting question.
Mm-hmm.
But I do encounter these archetypes in these stories frequently, right? I mean, it's set up that way so that the demons or the darker supernatural elements in the story represent a shadow archetype, and characters like Ed and Lorraine Warren, who were real people, but and actually did a lot of the things that Vera and Patrick, who portray them on film, are doing in the films. There are hero archetypes, right? They also represent a lover archetype. There's no one, like a lot of these characters don't also represent one archetype. They embody multiple archetypes. And so, the people who are possessed or who are afflicted by these shadow archetypes are innocents and, represent a sort of innocent archetype. Even if they're not innocent people, they're usually innocent in the sense of what they're confronting, this overwhelming darkness. What has been really interesting to me in working on these films, and something that has opened my mind as a diehard skeptic for much of my adult life, is something that's true that you mentioned, and I've heard before too, but you mentioned when you came to the set of The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, and did our set blessing, our production blessing at the beginning on day one before we started shooting anything. And you said something along the lines of, dark forces don't understand fiction.
Right.
When you invoke the darkness, when you tell these stories that bring up the demonic and play in this world, there are things out there that hear that are attracted to it, that listen to it, and that come. And this is why it's important to protect the crew and the film sets and, the people involved. We started doing set blessings on the Conjuring Universe films, beginning with the first Annabelle. Sorry. Beginning with The Conjuring 2, which was the third film in the series, because the first was The Conjuring in production. The second was the first Annabelle.
Right.
And what happened, I didn't work on the first Conjuring, but what happened to the crew on that film, there were things that people couldn't explain and things that scared people. And it wasn't a one-off incident. It was multiple things happening to multiple people, and sometimes at the same time, where people's clocks would go off at the same hour in the middle of the night, and they'd all wake up, come to the set and like, wow, my clock went off it stopped at whatever time. Oh, really? Mine did too. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
And not just once, when we did Annabelle, which I did work on, that started me on this journey of working on the Conjuring Universe films. There were a lot of weird things that happened on that movie too. And I think when we finished and put those two things together, by the time we got to The Conjuring 2, we were like, maybe we should do something about this to try and prevent these things from happening. So these archetypes exist in the real world, and we highlight them in a particular way in these films for entertainment, but it also, as you say, calls them in. And I've, particularly as a publicist who is one of the things that I'm tasked to do is to tell the story of the making of a film when I'm working on a film in production. And so I gather these stories, I I solicit them from crew members. Did anything weird happen to you? Or they'll come to me and tell me things. But when they start happening to me too, as a skeptic, and I don't know how to explain certain things, does it terrify me? No, because I'm not going to allow those things. If they are a dark force, I refuse to allow them to have influence over me and to come into my life and do the damage and create the chaos that they could potentially do, if they're real. But I don't know how to explain some of them,
Sure.
some of the things that have happened. And in that way, I think it's forced me to confront these different characters in a way that I might not have had I not done the work that I do.
Sure. Yeah.
Does that answer your question
It does.
or help to answer your question?
I think it answers it perfectly, actually, because, yes, clearly you referenced what I said that day, and I'm well familiar with how the universe sort of manufactures whatever it is that we put out into it. It's a massive Xerox machine. It's even lends itself, I think, to some of the upcoming theories in physics that are being tossed around, like simulation theory, because it does some really weird things. It definitely reflects the nature of creation in the truest sense that we can manipulate it. And this is what I try to explain to people, kind of why I was upset in the first hour of this show. I was on a podcast that wanted me to talk about exorcism, and then was asking me questions about what do I say to people who say it's all nonsense, and I explain, they want to know what I would see during an exorcism or during possession. What kind of things do you see? And I explained, it's sort of a toned down version of what you see in the movies. Movies are just exaggerations of what really happens, but there's parallels in real life that occur. But I brought it back to, but there's a reason for this, and it's not the reason that people think it is. It's not because there's some, malevolent, evil, powerful spirit that's lurking in the shadows here to, waiting for its chance to jump into you. That's the archetype making you think of it that way. That's not how it works. It works through psychological processes, which is why the very word psyche, where we get the word psychology in the ancient world, was not thought of as a reflection of some kind of medical field that deals with mental health. It was the soul. You're talking about the actual spiritual nature is how they would have looked at the psyche. It's how we get this. And so for the ancient person, there's no difference between the world of the mind and the world of the spirit. They are one in the same thing, which connects us intimately with the spiritual world. And this is a absolute truth. There's no question about it. And once you understand how those archetypes interact with the corporeal world, the phenomenal world, the world that we're more comfortable calling reality, that's when we can understand how some of these supernatural or paranormal things occur. And it can kind of help people that are skeptics or agnostics or atheists or whatever to sort of understand why people of faith, or people that are spiritual people at the very least, have these experiences and swear by them. They're not idiots. It's not because they're morons and they're childish or they haven't grown up or they're living in delusions. It's their real experiences, and there's a reason for why that happens. And I got irritated with this podcast because it was a pre-record and they edited all that part out. And they just kept the parts in that made it look all Halloween-y and horror-like.
Oh, boy.
And so, I'm a little irritated with that. I don't know if it was intentional. I think it was. But I'm willing to yield and say, well, maybe they just wanted to get to the parts they felt were important. But for me, the archetypes are the only important part of what I said. The how they manifest in terms of possession or demonic activity or exorcism is not the important part. The important part is understanding how these archetypes work in our minds and can manipulate the phenomenal world to produce results. And once science is willing to wrap its head around that, again, it used to, but then again, this is when psychology wasn't really considered a science. It was more like a philosophy in its origins. So back when Freud and Jung were talking about these things, psychology was more like philosophy. It was far less like science. And now it's trying very hard, and it's tried very hard for several decades now, to establish itself as a actual medical profession. So it doesn't want to have anything to do with this kind of psychoanalytical talk. But that's the whole foundation to it all. And that's how we can reconcile the difference between science and religion and spirituality and the objective world. It's how we can fix that, or at least bridge the divide between it, and heal any kind of ideologies that sort of separate the two. And all of that was removed from that show. So it's unfortunate that audience never got to hear it. And you're speaking to it, James, right now. You're explaining the importance of it. So yes, to answer your question, a long way of answering you. Yes, it actually, it really does answer the entire question. But I know that there's a lot of people out there that have questions for you too. So Jamie, do we have any questions for James from the chat room?
Yes, I'm going to ask the most recent question first, so forgive me. I think it'll be answered pretty quickly, and it's relevant. So I believe it was from Moosh. Asks, how many Conjuring movies did you bless, and did it work?
They had everything blessed after 2, but I only blessed the right. Devil Made Me Do It.
We were just the Conjuring 3.
Yeah. But I think you've had all of them, right?
So,
all of them were...
But it didn't mitigate anything.
Yeah, okay.
So we did not bless the first Conjuring. We did not bless the first Annabelle.
Okay.
We blessed Conjuring 2 and 3, and we blessed Annabelle 2 and 3. We did 2... Actually, we did, as Brian mentioned, we did 2 on The Conjuring 3 because one of our cast members was performing a dark rite and felt uncomfortable and
I
wanted
forgot about that. Yeah,
him to come back and do that. So we did 2 on that. We had 2 on The Curse of La Llorona, which is not technically part of the Conjuring universe, even though Annabelle and Father Perez appear in it. But we did also do blessings on that one. We had a Catholic priest who came in and did a Spanish blessing on Halloween. And we also had a curandero come in and do a blessing. I'm trying to think. Now, I didn't work on the Nun 2. I advised them to do one, but I don't know if they did. Mm-hmm. We did one on the first Nun in Romania. We had an Eastern Orthodox priest do one at one of the castles in Transylvania, and so I'm not counting, but I can't remember how many that is. And then, although not a part of the Conjuring universe and it hasn't been released yet, but we did also do a set blessing on Salem's Lot, which we shot in New England, and that was a little bit different. But because the writer-director was involved in the other films, it was a tradition that he was used to and felt comfortable with. Did they have any effect? Yes and no. On some of the productions, it seemed to have more of an effect than on others. Some sets, some productions were more active than others. On Annabelle Comes Home, we had a lot of trouble getting the blessing to happen. And Tony Spira, who used to work with Ed and Lorraine, he's their son-in-law,
right.
and he's taken over the New England Society for Psychical Research. He said to me that you keep getting canceled, you keep scheduling and you keep getting canceled, and there keeps being reasons that this isn't happening because the demonic is interfering with the blessing. They don't want it to happen. And when we actually had the priest there doing the blessing on that film, which we did in the artifact room set, we were recording it for the behind the scenes crew, and the sound from the moment that it began to the moment he concluded the blessing, the sound didn't record. The batteries were operational.
How familiar is that, right?
That's very familiar.
And all of the sound up to it and all of the sound after it recorded, and the equipment was in perfect working order. That was just, that's a small thing. But after we did that blessing, things kind of calmed down. Although that was one of the more active sets. I would say on that set that things were less malevolent, but and more prank oriented, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. It was there was a lot of weird stuff that happened on that one, but I don't know. Like I said, on some of them, it worked better than on others, but nobody got hurt. So that I'm aware of. So that's good.
I mean, yeah, the blessings can only, they're not magic. Okay. They're what they are I would almost call them empowerments. They work upon the grace of the individual, to awaken that they already possess within them. So if there's a lot of people who have cultivated grace in their life, then they're going to definitely receive a greater effect from a blessing than somebody that has no use for that type of thing. So, when you go into a movie set, you're going to get all types of people, right? People from all walks of life, all different belief systems. Some people are going to take that stuff seriously, some are not. And so the blessing can only do as much as the person there is willing to let happen. It's not a magical incantation. It sort of works. So it doesn't surprise me that you would see sort of yes and no as the answer to that, because it would make sense that some would get the benefit and others would not. It's an interesting question, though.
It may depend on the material that they're filming too.
Well, yeah, and like we were talking about with The Devil Made Me Do It, one of the sigils that was being used on the actor you're referring to was a real sigil. It's an actual demonic sigil. I confirmed it. So
Lesser seal.
I'd have to go back, and it's been a few years now. I don't remember exactly which one it was, but it was real. And so, yeah, even doing something like that in a playful way without the intention behind it is simply enough to put the risk. So, it was a good thing to come back and take care of that for them, so that, they would not have. But see, that's a different situation, because that individual was willing and wanted it. And so there's going to be more of an effect there when a person is open, and to receive a blessing. But blessings don't intrude, just like God doesn't intrude in our lives. He's there when we want him, and he will walk away when we don't. It's as simple as that. Brandon, do you see any questions for James?
I do. This was an earlier question, but not sure. He asks, when doing a reading for a person, does it help to use a picture of the person, or is it best to have them with you in the room?
Oh, good one.
I'm not entirely sure what that means in terms of having a picture, but I find that it doesn't matter whether somebody is in the room with me or on the phone. I feel like I could do a reading electronically, like over email or text, but that I don't feel like that would be as effective, just because there's not as much interaction. Yeah. But when you're on the phone or you're on Zoom, what's the most important thing is to have communication in real time with the person, whether they're in the room with you or not. That's what I found.
Yeah, I agree with that too. I have found I've never needed a picture of an individual. Now, I guess if you were reading somebody that you're not actively talking to in real time, I would think that that might help make a better connection. So if you're like doing something through mail, perhaps, or email, I know there are readers that take readings that way. I don't like reading that way. I mean, I think at the very least, a phone call is a more than a sufficient connection, but it can get sketchy if you're going beyond that, because you're trying to connect also with a person's energy, right? I mean, I find that to be almost an essential component. So I'm not sure a picture would be enough. I need at least to be talking to the person, even if it's over the phone.
I would rather be talking to the person in real time, whether it was on the phone or in person, than know what their question is.
Yes. Yeah.
That's more important, I think, because you can email me your question, or you could sit in front of me and ask me your question, but talking with somebody in real life, in real time, that doesn't want to give me their question, I can still do a more effective reading, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You're building that rapport.
That's important. Yeah. That's an important thing to do. Okay, what's our next one? Father Chris, have you seen any ones that haven't been addressed?
No, I think you caught the ones. I think there might have been. Hang on, I was gonna
got one from Kiki.
Here. Oh yeah,
Kiki's.
Yeah. Carry on.
Okay, Jamie.
If I can read my own writing. Where does the energy come from? To pick where does the energy come from to make you pick a certain card? Is it yours, the participants, or does it come from the ether itself?
That's a great question. Yeah. Probably comes from all three, depending on at some point. For me, most often, I don't know, like it's intuitive. The way that I am drawing the cards, and the way that I'm shuffling the cards, I have a very specific way that I learned from this director I was telling you about, Trish, of shuffling the cards. And so if I think I'm going to draw, and this is, sort of the methodical, maybe Capricornian way in me, and maybe it's an OCD way, but if I think I'm going to draw 5 cards or 3 cards, I shuffle the cards that many times, and then I lay them out in that many piles. So let's say I'm going to do a 5-card read initially, and then I lay out 5 cards, or I shuffle 5 times, I lay out 5 cards, and I shuffle, into 5 decks, and then I leapfrog those decks to put the deck back together. It's probably sounding very convoluted, but it's actually pretty easy.
Yeah.
And then I will have the querent cut the deck. And then that's for the first card. Like I said, most of the time I'll then pick it up and I just start sort of overhanding while we're talking. And when the next card is drawn, so there's a method for doing the first card. And then as each card is drawn after that, typically it's prompted by the conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. That's an interesting
when I'm having
way.
that conversation with somebody and that time to respond, it comes out in that moment.
Interesting. I like that. I've never tried that, but you've inspired me to give that a go, James. I'll see how that works for me next
time. The shuffling methodology is really interesting because it ensures that no matter what you do, you have shuffled those cards in such a way that no card that was beside itself before would accidentally remain, in that same configuration as it was before. And I've done that. I've laid it out where every card is placed and then the deck reconstructed. I mean, I just did this last week for a pull for myself, and every card was swords and cups, you know, in the whole draw. And it's like, how could I have drawn this? How could I have drawn the cards that I drew doing the shuffle that I did?
Right. Yeah. Intriguing. What's our next one? Do we have any more for him?
Only the one I saw was Moosh wanted to clarify that she was interested in how your blessing went on the set, but I think you answered it as far as people have to be receptive to it.
Well, I mean,
and why there were two. Why there were two?
There was another question as to why you all needed two on some of the films. Yeah.
Okay. So James, how did it work with The Devil Made Me Do It? Was my blessing there helpful for most of them, or? Yeah, I know. Everybody had a bottle of holy water on their desk by the time we were done.
I think that they really were receptive to what you said.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, we distributed bottles. Well, in fact, I still have a bottle over here on my shelf. We distributed bottles of holy water as part of the wrap gift on the show. It's really fascinating to me the number of crew members who are receptive and enthusiastically embrace these set blessings, regardless of their faith. They want some sort of a ceremony and appreciate the intent behind that ceremony to protect us spiritually and psychically on the sets. But I don't know if I ever told you this story or if you were aware of it, anybody else, Vera, ever told you, but on The Devil Made Me Do It, when you finish your blessing, Vera looked down at her script pages and there was blood on them. And Patrick said she got kind of freaked out because she's always been the one cast member who has been sort of plagued,
the most targeted,
certain things targeted. and so when she looked down, when everything was concluded and there was blood on her sides, and Patrick turns to her, and Patrick's the skeptic, and he's like, "Oh, you probably, you have a paper cut and you got blood on it." Yeah. And no paper cuts. Nobody's bleeding near me, but
somebody told me that. I don't know if it was Vera or not, but somebody told me that. I do know that story.
Well, I remember her and Patrick did make it a point to come up to us afterwards and introduce themselves and thanked us personally. So that was pretty cool.
That's interesting, though.
That's interesting, though.
They're really,
on the page,
they're really great.
Huh.
No, they were. It was a nice cast. Everybody was so wonderful to work
with. And that's one of the things about these movies that's so funny. I have people say to me a lot of the time, don't you get scared? Or isn't it creepy, or isn't it weird? And even with some of the creepy and weird things that have happened to other people and also to me on these sets, it's not weird and it's not scary. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that we have filmmakers who are loyal to the crew that work on these films. Not everybody on every film is exactly the same from film to film. That's kind of impossible in the circus world that we live in filmmaking. But there's a lot of consistency, particularly with department heads throughout the span of these films. And we're like a family. And we might not see each other for a year after one is done, but then we make another one and we come back. A lot of us do continue to socialize outside of the movies. We've become very close. And so we're in, without calling it a sacred environment, and it seems maybe kind of weird to call the set of a horror film that deals frequently with demonic possession or demonic plaguing.
We've got that built-in support of each other. So
it's a sacred place where, and we're not on set constantly doing what you see on screen, right? So one of the things that blows my mind with an actor, and I think you were talking about this last week, is actors who I appreciate all good actors because it is a craft and it's difficult to do in front. I think it's more difficult to do in front of a crew than it is to do it on a stage. Because on a stage, you have a narrative that you're taking from beginning to end within the course of the real time of the story.
Yeah, no interruption. Not the yeah.
No planned unplanned interruptions typically, right? You know, maybe an intermission. And you have an audience out there in the dark that's responding to you. It's harder, I think, for actors in film and television in a lot of ways. So an actor who, regardless of their process, I respect, but I'm so impressed personally by actors who can perform a scene that is emotionally taxing or physically draining, and then, you know, the director yells cut and they turn it off and they turn around and they're laughing and joking and talking with you or with each other or with whomever. And Vera and Patrick are like that. We when we did Annabelle Comes Home, Katie, she was incredible. She was screaming. There was one day she was screaming all day for 10 to 12 hours. I kid you not. Constantly screaming, running around the house all day. And every time, cut, even by the end of the day, she was your friend, you know? She was a part of everybody. And even though what you say is true, that there's no distinction, or it's more difficult to make that distinction in the psychic world between fiction and reality when we're telling these stories. For us, as crew members and cast in the real world, there is a distinction. Mm-hmm. And when we cut a scene, we're joking and laughing and having fun, usually, hopefully, if it's a good set. And on these films, they are, because it comes from the top down, and the filmmakers are incredible, the producers, the directors, you know, on all of them, they're just really great people.
Right.
And they wouldn't tolerate a set that was full of tension. And I think that would invite more in as well.
Oh, sure.
But
yeah, I think that's like built-in therapy.
Yeah, no, it's just, I don't know. Like, how incredible is it for me personally, when we break for lunch, to go sit down across the table from the actor who's playing a demon with his demon head on, but he's got his teeth out and his horns off so that he can have lunch like one of the guys with everybody else, you know? It undermines the tension and fear.
I'm sure the closest y'all, how you bond on the set, I'm sure that helps when you do have those serious or those traumatic scenes. It does help that you have that built-in camaraderie, that when it cut is given, y'all can just go back to being who you were before, and it keeps people on an even keel.
Yeah.
And hopefully,
I suspect it's why also, you know, I mean, and I'm not saying this to blow smoke, I mean it. You know, those films are, you know, as somebody who is an enthusiast of supernatural horror films and a priest, those films are my favorite films that have been made in you know, for this generation of filmmakers. You know, I mean, it's obviously there's The Exorcist, you know, but I think that, and I think this is extendable to lots of areas of life, especially in creative arts, that if there's a really if there's a goodness at the heart of the creators, that there's a charisma charisma in the true sense, not being loud, the charisma that draws people in. There's a charisma that is reflected in what's produced. I think that's also true in ordinary life or ordinary people as well. But I think especially in film, and I think the opposite, where that's been the opposite in films, where it's been really torturous, that also produces a kind of effect, but it's a very different kind of effect.
Well, I'm going to say something that's probably going to be a little controversial.
Oh, not you.
I'm in that mood tonight. But it's true. It's true. It's no secret for those that have listened to me for years. I'm not a huge fan of Ed and Lorraine Warren. But Vera and Patrick made me love them, at least as the characters that they portrayed, because they're really good. I really, when I watch The Conjuring, you just fall in love with those characters.
You do.
And that's just the brilliance of the art form and the talent of the actors, the cast, the director's input, the entire vision. I agree with Father Chris. I don't think there's a horror movie that compares to it since the old, the 70s horrors like Exorcist and Amityville horror. There hasn't been anything that good. Maybe Poltergeist, that's like early 80s, but there hasn't been anything that good since that time. And Conjuring came out and kind of gave us that style back. So I think they're wonderful. Mm-hmm. I think they're doing a fourth one, aren't there? Isn't there plans for that? James?
There is. You can't expect us to commit to that.
Well, I know he can talk. He can at least say that there's plans, because I think it's pre-production, right?
It's not even pre-production yet. I mean, a lot of things have been stalled, obviously, because of strikes. Yeah. That are one resolved, one is still ongoing.
I can write if you need a freelance writer. That's okay. I'll help you out.
Well, the writer's strike is over, so I'm sorry. We got our writer back. But yeah, it is. There is a fourth that is planned. Yep, and hopefully we'll go into production next year.
I hope so. Yeah, because it really is the best franchise out there, in my opinion, for this kind of thing. It is for me,
because it brought me together with my soulmate that you wanted to talk a little bit about.
Yes, let's do that.
Bring me the kitty.
Here we go. Prepare for it, everyone.
Bring the kitty,
This
James.
is the cat of cats right here.
Oh, there's the precious baby.
Pookie. Say hi.
Hi, Pookie.
That's a very cute cat.
I walked into James' office. on the first day that I arrived at the studio, and as soon as I walked through the door, then within a second, all of a sudden, this cat just lunged onto my shoulders. Right. It was the most surreal thing. I thought, this is a great cat. I want a cat that does this.
And he's only gotten better.
Yeah.
I mean, he was still a little bit of a terror when you met him, and he's just gotten better.
That yawn. Yeah. Just told me, Dad. Just told me.
So that is a true Transylvanian cat right there.
Yep.
Brilliant.
Yep. He came, he was hanging around our set. So when we were shooting the first Nun, which we shot in Romania, we were shooting at a studio, primarily in Bucharest. And we went up to a couple of different castles in Transylvania to shoot some of the work that we needed to up there. Mm-hmm. And at the first castle in Hunadora, our producer-writer, Gary Doberman, and our production designer, Jen Spence, teamed up to adopt and rescue a stray dog. There's a lot of strays in Romania. It's really kind of tragic. And And it's a lot more difficult to rescue a dog and bring it back to America, but apparently not as much for a cat. So then when we went to the next
your cat has a passport, does it?
Yes, a Romanian. Yeah,
I had to get him a Romanian passport.
Yeah. How many cats do you know with a passport?
And
look at good stretch.
So we went to the other castle. I wasn't planning on getting the cat. We already had 2 cats. And he was hanging out by our craft service table. and we were shooting nights, and I was primarily working days. I would go to the set and work for a few hours at night. And I just wound up spending I'd get my crew going up at the location, and then I'd go back down to craft service, and I'd sit there with him all night, hanging out. And I started to bring him real food because everybody was feeding him scraps, and I felt bad for him.
Yeah.
And then on the last night, I felt, I felt bad, but I left him. I left him behind, and he went running off in the grass to play with a bug, and that's when I left because I didn't want him to see me leave and try and follow me.
Yeah.
I went back to Bucharest, which is a 5-hour drive, and for 3 nights I went to bed in emotional turmoil and tears. And my husband, I thought, he had said to me, "Don't think about bringing him home. What are we going to do?" And I thought, I don't care what he thinks, in more unkind terms than that. Mm-hmm. And I thought, I'm going to go back and find that cat and bring him home, even if we just foster him. And so I went back, and I initially had asked our production designer, because there was a crew striking sets, if they would try and find him and bring him home. And they couldn't find him. And so I was like, you know what, I just can't trust that. So I drove up myself. 5 hours.
My gosh.
Was literally crossing over the town limits, and the phone rang. It was the art department calling to say the guys felt bad. They went back out that morning, and they were able to locate him, and he was on the truck headed back to the studio.
Oh.
So I thought, all right, well, stop for lunch and drive 5 hours back and go, so it was meant to be. But I just couldn't think of leaving him behind. And he's the best thing that ever happened to me. And it was quite easy to bring a cat home.
Yeah.
They didn't care.
They didn't care.
There's almost no. In fact, the Border Patrol guy, when I came through at LAX, he goes, "Why did you check that you're bringing a live animal home?" And he was sitting on top of my trolley in a case, like right in front of the guy's face. And I said, "Because I have a live animal." And he goes, "Well, what's in there?" And I said, "A cat." And he goes, "Go."
Just a cat.
Kind of like codeine, right?
Right.
He was only looking for bats.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I know we're coming up towards the end.
Yes.
I wanted to ask if it was okay if I plug in an event that I'm going to be doing coming up.
Anything you want to tell the audience, anywhere to reach you, or websites, anything, go ahead.
So I have some friends that opened a brick and mortar tarot store here in the Los Angeles area back in July, and it's a place called Tarot Arts. They also have a website, tarotarts.com. But the brick and mortar store is incredible. I've never seen more tarot decks in one place anywhere. And they have a real appreciation for tarot, and they've been doing events. So they are going to be having the creator of the Lilifer Tarot, which is one of my favorite decks, and she has a new gold edition, which is really beautiful.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it's a gorgeous deck.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be moderating a Q&A. So I'll be doing a Q&A with Marion at Tarot Arts on November 4th, 1017 Mission Street in South Pasadena, November 4th at 3 p.m. I'll also be recording it and posting it to my YouTube, which is James Jude Tarot, if people aren't in the area or can't make it and are curious. But Marion's a really interesting person. It'll be fun to talk with her about the deck.
No, that sounds fantastic. And if you wouldn't mind just giving your Instagram and all that out again.
Yeah, my Instagram is at James Jude Tarot, and the YouTube is the same. Pookie has his own Instagram.
Sure does.
Pookie from Transylvania.
Yeah.
And he's just this little guy here. Well, I'm going to try and get on my shoulder so that I can have my hands back. He might not want to stay. He's Pookie from Transylvania. And I think, he's going to go on his own. I think that's about it. We have another cat that wandered into our yard in June that we were going to foster, and we failed. So he also has an Instagram account, but I don't post to them all the time. It's just too much time, but I do occasionally. His is Lord Wobblington, not Lord Wobblington, because he has CH. He has something called cerebellum hypoplasia, and so he kind of like acts like he's drunk because he doesn't have his full motor coordination.
Okay.
But he's a cute guy. That's it. But James Jude Tarot is me.
Well, James, I really want to thank you for being on the show, and I would love to invite you back if your schedule permits, maybe next season, after you've had a chance to work with this deck that I'll send out to you. And I really would like you to come on the show and talk about your experiences with it after you've had a chance to mess around with it a little bit. Would you be willing to do that?
Anytime.
That'd be great. I mean, I think it would just be fascinating to get your perspective because, it's rare where I find somebody that sort of instantly connects with the archetypes. I think like I said, I really do attribute that to some of your artistic nature and the work you do. It sort of helps to facilitate it, but you're the most qualified person I can think that could, be working with something that's so new and completely unexpected because you didn't go through the classes. You're going to go in fresh. You're going to be able to see it with fresh eyes. My students, could be influenced by what they learn. So I'd look forward to that. Brandon will definitely be in touch. And next time we're out, I know we tried to get together with you, but the Ghost Adventure schedule for this last episode was brutal.
We're in and out.
There was no chance to even call you to see if we could even meet up for 20 seconds.
That was grueling.
But next time, we do film in LA a lot. So next time we're out in LA and the schedule's a little more permissive, we'll definitely need to get together for at least dinner or something.
I would love that. I really would. I would.
Yeah, I miss you. We all do. Tracy as well, and she wants to tell you hi.
Hi.
Yeah. So there you have it, everybody. Archetypes. We're not going to be here next week because of Halloween. Okay, so no show next week, but in 2 weeks we will return with an open lines, open topics, and I want to just thank our guest, James, again. Thank you, Brandon. Thank you, Father Chris. Thank you, Jamie. And thank you, everyone, for being here with us tonight. Sorry for my little rant at the beginning, but, I needed to be said. It really needed to be said. You did. You got me through it. Yeah, you did. You got me through it. Anyway, until then, I'll see you out there in the ether. God bless everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Miss you, James.